So we've all experienced, as we may have all experienced in the last year, COVID has been a huge adjustment for us all, with its many challenges and in some cases benefits for us here at Rotaract. Our next speaker is going to fill us in on how we can keep a positive headspace during the rest of the pandemic. And so Kaitee is a community program coordinator for the Canadian Mental Health Association of New Brunswick and serves in the Woodstock region in New Brunswick. Although her work is usually based largely in the community coordinating and facilitating presentations, programs, and workshops, events, and awareness campaigns, CMHA has quickly adapted to the virtual world. Kaitee is passionate about mental health and helping others to find health and happiness within themselves. Welcome, Kaitee. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm just going to share my screen as I have a presentation. And I'm going to do my very best to keep it as short as I can, because I know that we only have a certain amount of time. So thanks so much for having me here today. And we're going to look at some coping tools for how to keep ourselves well during this pandemic and just in general, because wellness is hard enough on a daily basis without all of the added stress of the current events. So the Canadian Mental Health Association has been around for a little over 100 years. And in New Brunswick, we have locations all over the province, so that essentially the whole province is covered, with offices in our main cities, Fredericton, Moncton, and St. John, and then community program coordinators like myself sprinkled throughout rural New Brunswick. So really every community has support. We also have provincial peer support programs as well as employment programs in the province. So we'll start with a few statistics. 1 in 5 individuals will experience a mental health problem each year, and 1 in 3 will experience a mental health problem in their lifetime. So many individuals will be influenced by mental health and mental illness. 500,000 Canadians miss work each week due to a mental health concern, and almost a quarter of Canadians report having a high degree of life stress. And although there's a lot of cost involved when it comes to lost productivity, reductions in health-related quality of life, healthcare, a lot of primary care doctor visits are stress-related, about 60 to 80%. And that's not necessarily going there and saying, hey, I'm stressed, I'm experiencing stress. Many times it's actually physical symptoms of stress. It could be hypertension or something to do with the heart or high blood pressure, things like that that really go back to stress. And something that we want to make sure that everyone knows, because I know that there is a stigma when it comes to mental health and mental illness, is that although, we say that there's the 1 in 5 individuals who will experience a mental health problem each year, 5 in 5 of us experience mental health and can benefit from resiliency because we all have a mind. When it comes to understanding stress, stress is essentially our body's reaction to changes that require physical, emotional, or mental adjustment or some kind of response. And as human beings, we're creatures of habit. We don't like change, even if it's good change. So it can be difficult and stressful when there's any kind of disruption or change in our lifestyle. It's important to know that there is negative stress as well as positive stress. For instance, I was experiencing stress prior to doing this presentation because, well, public speaking is stressful, but it was good stress because it meant that it motivated me to do my best, right? And to practice and things like that. I'm a big fan of this formula, mainly because I was big in trigonometry in high school and formulas just make sense. But this essentially means, stress equals the pressure that we experience being greater than the resources that we have to deal with it. And it's important to note that, how much stress is too much? When does it become too much? And that's an individual answer because stress is so individual and unique for each and every one of us. What I might find stressful may be different to what you find stressful because we have different resources and coping skills and different life experiences. So it's also important to be, gentle on ourselves when we're experiencing stress, but understanding of others as well. because what might not be stressful for you could be stressful for someone else. And it's not the event that determines if an experience will be stressful or even traumatic, but rather our experience of the event. So it really is that individual experience. So just a little note on cognitive behavioral therapy, because when it comes to our thoughts, our feelings, our physical feelings and behavior, it is truly all connected. And so when it comes to changing something within our mind or within our body or our feelings, if we change just simply one thing, usually we'll see a chain reaction. And if we find ourselves in a dark place or in a negative place, and our thoughts and our feelings and our behavior are just kind of in a vicious circle of us just going around and around in this circle of negativity, sometimes the way to jump out of that vicious circle is to just change one thing. An example that we often use is, say, you're walking down the street and you see a friend and you wave, hi, Marissa, how are you doing? Haven't seen you in a while. And she totally ignores me. And so maybe my feelings are hurt, and then that affects my behavior. So maybe I withdraw and I don't go out as much, and it affects my physical feelings. And so maybe I experience aches and pains or digestive upset or things as a result. And then it just perpetuates more and more and more, going around and around. Whereas if I change just one thing, maybe thinking, oh, Marissa must not have seen me. And then, changing my behavior and going up to her and say, hey, I said hi, but you didn't see me. Maybe you're distracted. Anything going on? How have you been? And then that's all it really takes to stop that vicious circle. So just to note that simply changing one aspect can really change the whole of the situation. And sometimes it comes down to our perspective too. Rather than thinking, oh, she's ignoring me. Oh, something must be on her mind or she didn't notice me. So sometimes it really does come down to our perspective and the way that we're thinking and just changing it a little bit. And so just to note that this isn't just a toolbox. And when we say a toolbox, we think of, I imagine like a toolbox, but full of skills and resources and things that can help us to be our best selves and to be healthy and happy and well. And so it means regularly assessing your mental health. How am I doing? Checking in with yourself. If you have an action plan or even just goals, reviewing those regularly. How am I going to reach my goals? How am I going to stay happy and healthy? And then assess your tools and your skills and figure out what you need at that time. Because although, there's some days that I certainly do need to do some yoga. There's days when, yoga is just not a good idea for me. Even though that is a skill that's in my toolbox, it's not one that's universal and can be used for everything. And so knowing what skill to use in the right time is just as valuable as having those skills to begin with. And a big part of that is getting to know yourself and knowing, what works when. We'll look at our thoughts because it really is that self-awareness. It begins with regular check-ins. I find that, most of us eat roughly 3 times a day, 3 main meals. And if we make a habit of checking in with ourselves during mealtime, then that's a really good habit to be in and recognize when we might need to use our skills or change our thoughts or things like that. Recognizing your symptoms and triggers of stress, knowing what that looks like for you, getting to know yourself. And then looking at your lifestyle, your routine, your values, thoughts, and perceptions. Do they align? Is that who you are and kind of who you've always been? Does your behavior or your thoughts, and your routine, does it all kind of align with who you want to be and where you'd like to go? And then just being aware of little changes that we can make to keep ourselves on that right path of happy, healthy, and well. When it comes to our focusing on what's strong rather than what's wrong is really beneficial. And not only when it comes to ourselves, but when it comes to others as well and the world in general. Focusing on the positives. And instead of always trying to fix what's wrong, rather focusing on what is right. What are the positives in the situation? What are the strengths? within ourselves, especially because we're quite critical. It's very easy to pick out the bad in the situation or the negative rather than trying to force yourself to focus on the positives. And then knowing the difference. So, what can you change? What is within your realm of control? What can you have effect on? And if it's not within your control, learning to let it go, which can be difficult and takes practice, as all of these skills do, but is possible. And once we have a better sense of what is within our realm of control and what we are capable of changing, and essentially that really just is ourselves and our reactions. That's what we have control over, our behavior. Then we can realize that it's not other people's feelings aren't our responsibility. It's not our responsibility to make things right for people or to fix them. And instead, maybe rather than focusing on the things that are wrong that needs to be fixed, just focusing on what is right and knowing how you can help and how you can have an effect on things. Because we can only change our response to the events, not others or the events themselves. Then taking a look at our feelings. So a wonderful way to, if you're experiencing big feelings or overwhelming feelings, or even we see this a lot with panic or anxiety, having a mindful grounding technique to bring you back into the moment with your five senses can be a really helpful skill for, well, first of all, it's a distraction from your surroundings in your mind of like what's going on. And it can take your mind off of things and really focus on the senses and what's going on in that moment for you presently, being mindful, trying to take your mind off your thoughts and bring it into the present moment so that we can have that sense of peace again. And so just looking around you, your surroundings, and seeing 5 things that you can see right now, 4 things that you can touch right now, 3 things that you can hear right now, and 2 things that you can smell, and then 1 thing that you can taste. And if this is something that you find is beneficial that you'd like to do fairly regularly, or it's one that just works well for you, being prepared, sometimes having like a sensory calming box with 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can touch, sensory things, music or little rattlers or things like that that you can hear, some things that you can smell, and maybe some gum or Werther's Original or something that you can taste, and you have that all with you so that you can do this at any time, not worrying about not having what you need. I'm going to try to keep this slide short because I could do a whole presentation on gratitude. Honestly, self-care and gratitude is how I've survived this pandemic, by drastically increasing those 2 things. It's what's worked for me. It's what I've done to cope. And self-care is something that we hear a lot about, and it can really be anything. For me, it's journaling, having a way to express myself and forcing myself to think about the positives. So what that looks like for me is sitting down with my gratitude journal and reflecting, taking a moment to reflect positively on my day and on my life, and picking out the things that I am grateful for, thankful for, appreciative of, things that I'm lucky to have in my life, and then writing those down. I try to aim for 5 things each day. But something that I've recently learned that I find really helpful, not only as someone who does struggle with self-esteem a little bit, but also as, that confidence boost, that pick me up, is being thankful for yourself. Because we always think of, we have to be grateful for, outside things, but you have just as much to be grateful for and appreciative of about yourself. So what do you appreciate about yourself? What are you thankful for? The way that looks for me is that I write down, I love myself today because, and then I fill it full of compliments and kind words and things that I like about myself. And on days when that's especially hard, I think of what other people would say. And so that's a wonderful way of really, focusing on what's strong rather than what's wrong, and having that attitude of gratitude You'll notice too that this can become a daily practice as part of your routine. And once it does, it really does shift your perspective to be more positive and to see the good rather than automatically looking for the negative. So it's something that I really truly encourage you to try. And another way, if you're not a writer like me, you can share it out loud. Something that is quite common is giving thanks at dinner time. And that's something that we can share with people what we're grateful for. Um, Emily was speaking about going to different countries to help with polio. And I know that we have a fair bit of newcomers in our area. And anytime that I work with them, what amazes me is despite how difficult their life circumstances have been in their life experiences that they've went through, the amount of gratitude that they have is just astounding. It's amazing. And positive attitude. And so for me, that really speaks volumes as to just how powerful this is, because it doesn't have to be what you went through. It doesn't always determine where you have to be or where you have to go. So yeah, gratitude is something that's so powerful and magical. And I truly see it as a gift, as something that we can give to ourselves and to others. Because I know that it makes me feel good when someone tells me what they're grateful for about me. And so I hope that you can share that with others as well. And then looking at our behavior, looking at how we can include self-care as part of our daily routine, having things that give us a sense of meaning in our day, setting goals, realistic goals that we can accomplish to make us feel good, taking off things on our to-do list, and then focusing on how we're going to take care of ourselves that day, whatever that looks like. Because it is important to remember that we all have good days and bad days. And so maybe your goals for today and the things that you need to do is just get out of bed, shower, get dressed, and eat something. And how will I take care? Maybe I'll get out for a walk, or I'll read a book, or I'll reach out to a friend today. But it doesn't have to be anything extravagant. It can be simple little things. And kindness. Kindness is something that I'm sure you're all very familiar with. As when I think of Rotary and Rotaract, that's one of the things that first comes to my mind is kindness and generosity for others. But kindness is simply put the easiest way that we can make the world a better place. Kindness towards others, but also self-kindness, self-compassion. You're all wonderful, amazing people with very kind hearts, big hearts, who are willing to give of yourself to the world to make it a better place. You certainly deserve self-kindness and self-compassion as well. And I know that can be hard at times, especially if it doesn't come naturally, but it is something that with practice we can get better at. And it's something that with those check-ins, noticing, how am I talking to myself? Am I being gentle on myself? Am I being nice? Because many of us are very critical of our own selves and would never speak to a friend in the way that we speak to ourselves. So practicing some of that kindness that we give to others for ourselves. And then some simple relaxation techniques that might be beneficial for you. Things like yoga, meditation, massage, fishing and hunting, getting out in nature. Music is very therapeutic, whether you're making music or listening to music. Building things with your hands. I'm a big crafter personally. So building a birdhouse and painting it and decorating it sounds very relaxing to me. Rock climbing, going for long walks, just getting out in nature, getting some fresh air, candles, finding your peaceful environment, wherever that might be. I know for me, it's always by water, because water seems to be where I'm in my element and always at peace. So having an environment that's peaceful for you that you can go to relax. And maybe trying some of these techniques if you haven't already. And then connecting with others is more important than ever, especially now. Balancing social connections with things that give us a sense of achievement and enjoyment is crucial in life. It's what we need to feel that overall sense of purpose and connection and wellness. Social connection can also support lowering feelings of stress, anxiety, or depression. So thinking of ways that you feel comfortable building new connections within the coming week. whether it's just reaching out to a friend, sending a letter in the mail to maybe someone out of province that you can't see, um, whatever it may be, making those connections. And then physically, relaxation breathing is very beneficial when it comes to calming the mind and calming the body. Because usually when you're able to calm the mind, the body follows, calm the body, and the mind will follow. So this is a relaxation breathing technique called 4-7-8. And it's where you inhale for the count of 4. Typically, we do it through our nose. Hold for the count of 7, and then exhale through your mouth for the count of 8. This isn't the most comfortable for everyone. Admittedly, I'm not a fan because I find that the hold and the exhale are a little bit uncomfortable. I much prefer this square breathing. It's easy to remember. I can do it anywheres, and it's more comfortable for me personally. So you might want to play around with different breathing techniques and find what you like best. This is also known as box breathing. And so we just inhale for the count of 4, hold for the count of 4, exhale for the count of 4, hold for the count of 4, and do it again. And I'm always a fan of doing it with my finger because I'm a visual person. And it's very simple because it's just, inhaling and counting to 4, holding, counting to 4, exhaling for the count of 4, and then, doing it over and over until you feel that sense of peace and relaxation that you need and that calm. And we're just going to touch briefly on sleep. I'm not going to go too in depth in this because a lot of it is basic knowledge and I'm scared that I'm running low on time. Trying to squeeze it all in. So certainly setting a bedtime and wake up time and trying to keep that quite consistent. If you've been in bed for more than 20 minutes trying to sleep, just get up and try again later. But avoiding stimulants or stimulating activities because we don't want things to get us excited. I know I always tell my partner, no tickle fights before bed because everyone just gets all excited and rowdy and it's hard to settle down. Avoiding naps unless your body is indicating to you that you absolutely need one. And keeping your bed for sleep or sex only because nowadays we were watching TV in our bedroom where I know sometimes, my daughter's in my bedroom. When I first started working from home, I was working in my bed a bit, and that's not healthy because we want that environment to be optimal for sleep and one that we associate with sleep as well. That's why it's so important to develop a sleep routine or a ritual for sleep because it helps our body associate those certain practices or activities with getting ready for bed. So then once we have a bath, then our mind says, okay, we only have a bath at night. That's our bedtime activity. We're getting ready for bed. And then we brush our teeth and wash our faces and get into our jammies and whatever it may be. But having that routine that once we start that, your mind says, okay, getting ready for bedtime. Let's start to wind down. And then shutting off the screens, keeping exercise, vigorous exercise for earlier in the day so that we can wind down at night. Trying to not watch the clock, avoid exposure to light, and managing our stress levels. So really just having that optimal environment for sleep. And when it comes to exercise, there's so many mental health benefits of physical activity. It's really endless. It may prevent anxiety and depression. It can reduce our day-to-day stress, can support prevention of cognitive decline, enhance our cognitive functioning so we'll focus better, be able to concentrate. It'll have a positive impact on our memory. It can also support academic or employment concentration or performance. And not to mention that it's also going to make us feel good. It's going to be easier for us to go to bed at night. We'll sleep well. And I don't know about you, but I noticed that after I exercise, I feel really good, not only about myself, but like I have this boost. And I mean, scientifically, I think that they call that adrenaline or endorphins. When I talk to kids, I just call them the happy hormones that we get when we move around. And no matter how old you are, I think that's something that we can all relate to. When we move around, we feel good. It's as simple as that. So trying to get that exercise in however you can, whether it's a little bit each day or scheduling time for it, even if it's just making the time for just little movement, stretching, whatever it might be, getting some of that movement. And if you can get fresh air and sunshine at the same time, then that's even better. So we've talked about some helpful tools to add to your toolbox, but we'll look at some to remove from your toolbox as well. Just three main ones that we call emotional escape strategies. So avoidance is the number one emotional escape strategy that we see, and this can be done in almost any way possible. I know that for me, when I was experiencing depression, I would use naps and sleep as a form of avoidance, of avoiding life, of reality, and just sleeping it away. But there's really many different ways that we can avoid, whether it's canceling plans or withdrawing and staying to ourselves, whatever it may be. Also, numbing and withdrawing. So, withdrawing into ourselves, staying away from people, and numbing, whether we're using, substances or behaviors that essentially aren't healthy for us. And anger is something that we see as an escape strategy as well, a lot of times. Typically, we do see it a lot with men, but it is something that we see with women as well, where rather than experiencing that painful emotion, we'll just switch to anger instead, because that's a way of avoiding the pain and the hurt that we're experiencing. But either way, all of these emotional escape strategies can be harmful for either ourselves or others. And it's a lot easier when we're able to experience what we're going through and accept it and live it and let it go. Because I'm not sure if you've noticed this or not, but I know that for me, when I experience an emotion or a feeling or a thought or whatever it may be, and I don't want to, and I judge it and I kind of wrestle with it, it sticks around a lot longer. Whereas if I had just felt it, accepted it, and I find mindfulness can be helpful with this as well. Okay, I'm having, negative feelings, or I'm having a bad thought. That's okay. That's natural. That's normal. We'll just let it go and try to kind of ignore it, if that makes sense. So trying to avoid using some of these unhealthy emotional escape strategies and reaching for our coping toolbox instead, and looking at how we can cope in a healthy way. And resiliency is something that we are all capable of. And it comes in the form of making connections, about seeing crisis, like we don't see crisis as insurmountable problems. We know that we can get over it, we can get through it. Resiliency is about being able to bounce back from difficult challenges, accepting that change is part of living, it's part of life, moving towards your goals when you're able to, taking decisive action, sharing concerns and stressful feelings, and then looking for those opportunities for self-discovery, for self-growth. One of my favorite quotes is, "There's no growth in the comfort zone, and there's no comfort in the growth zone." And that's something that I've experienced to be true. When we step outside of our comfort zone, that's when we grow the most and discover the most about ourselves. And despite how difficult and uncomfortable and anxiety provoking it is, that's where the magic happens. Also, nurturing a positive view of yourself, being kind to yourself and gentle, keeping things in perspective. And that can be difficult. So sometimes it might mean getting someone else's perspective, maintaining a hopeful outlook, because we know that these are hard times, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and we will all get through this. We mentioned physical exercise, helping others, because that makes us feel good as well. So I'm sure you've all realized. And then, of course, taking care of yourself, doing what you can, because we can't pour from an empty cup, right? So doing what we can to make sure that we're nurturing ourselves and making sure that we're taking care of our mind, body, and soul. And then when it comes to coping strategies for the current situation with COVID-19, as I mentioned myself, I've had to drastically increase my self-care during this pandemic. And it has been hard work, and it means making that a priority. It sometimes means canceling plans, because I need to take care of me so that I can be the best me for those around me. Facing stressors instead of avoiding them. So like I said before, how the more that we push them away and wrestle with them or avoid them, typically the longer they last. And then intentional practices that promote your wellness. So intentionally doing things that make you feel good and make you well. So staying active, keeping yourself busy, doing things that you enjoy, staying connected, finding that balance in your life of, home, your personal life, your work life, just all of it. And be kind to yourself. And I really can't say this enough. It's one thing to be kind to others, but we need to be kind to ourselves as well. We are just as important. And taking care of your body and then reaching out for help when you need it. And that might just mean giving a friend a call and say, hey, I'm having a hard day. Can we talk? It doesn't need to mean calling Chemo or a helpline or going to the hospital or anything like that. It can simply just be talking, using some of your skills, letting people know, hey, I'm having a bad day or I'm struggling a bit. And then noticing hypervigilance, as this is something that some of us might experience right now. Grounding techniques such as that mindful grounding that we looked at. Taking time to grieve because we have lost so much through this pandemic. We've not lost our sense of normal, our sense of control, and there is a lot of uncertainty. So there are going to be things that take some grieving. And try to find personal ways to heal. I know for me, that's been a lot of writing and journaling and a lot of nice hot baths. Looking for the positive or the hope in the situation. So that once again, focusing on what's strong rather than what's wrong, trying to see the best in the situation. And then keeping track of your mental and physical wellness. What changes do you notice? How can you improve it? Is there anything that you can do specifically that can make your mental and physical wellness better? And get to know your signs. Share them with those that care about you. What are things that you should look out for that are your specific signs for when you need to reach out or when things are becoming too much? And then reaching out for that professional help when things do become too much. And then using strategies or resources that you've learned that can help you. And it's important to remember that what's worked for us in the past, chances are will still work for us now. So looking at how have I coped in the past and how can I use those strategies now to help get me through this difficult time. And we'll look at just a few resources. I know when I say resources, you might expect links and phone numbers and things like that. But essentially, it's people that are in every community. Our friends and our family are our number one supports. They are our support network, I hope. Not in all cases, but usually they are the people that care the most and want to help us. Support lines as well are usually there. There's 24-hour support lines, nationally as well as provincially. Our general practitioners, our family doctors, mental health services, psychotherapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, community support services, employee assistant programs, crisis services, and holistic practices, along with many other things. Really, there's so much out there that can help you to feel more yourself if you find that you have been struggling. So I hope that I've kept good time and we have a few moments for some questions. If you'd like to ask some questions or if you have any comments, I'll give you this time now to do so. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen so I can see you if you'd like to unmute and ask a question or anything. I feel like I zoomed right through that. I'm so sorry. It's usually an hour presentation. But I know that we're pressed for time, so.
Does anybody have any questions? I would just like to say, Katie, that you have such a calming way of speaking. I feel like as I was listening to you, I was like, oh, I'm feeling less stressed already.
Aw,
So
wonderful.
you have been a great person, in my opinion, to speak to these issues. And I really love how you brought up how stress can present itself in different ways to different people, and that different mechanisms of coping work for different people. Because I think that's something that's really important to recognize if somebody has never pointed it out to you. So thank you for not only pointing out how things can work in everyone's life, but really like specifying how like mental health is a complex and nuanced thing, and that it is different for different people. Because I think these days, especially where everything can be shared, sometimes it's easy to think that my way must be just like your way, and your way must be like that person's, and so I feel like you really speak to that really well.
Well, thank you. Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.